About your 7 to 8 rule?
Absolutely. My 7 to 8 rule stems from so many of us focusing our food on fruit because so many of us know that we're supposed to have them. 7 to 8 rule should be 7 to 8 veggies and fruit a day instead of fruits and veggies a day.
Okay.
I like 5 of those to be fruit. I'm sorry, 5 of those to be veggie and 2 being fruit.
Okay.
And of the veggies, really focusing on greens. And one of the things that I love to share with people is if you can eat a rainbow of colors, you know, try to go into the produce department. There's so much color here, and seeing if you can't get one of each color every day.
Okay, that's a great idea. So eat a rainbow a day.
Eat a rainbow a day.
With greens, why would we want to focus on greens specifically?
Greens are huge antioxidants and superpowers when it comes to fighting against things like cancer, and really helping with metabolism, digestion, things like that.
Now, antioxidants. Can you tell me about that? Because I think that's a big, scary word for a lot of people.
So that's sort of like your fighters in your body.
Okay.
So anything that comes in, whether it be a virus that someone coughs in a bus, or whether it be something that is in the environment, or something that's in your body, you're fighting with antioxidants, and so it's sort of the superpower in your body.
So if I was teaching this to a child, would it be appropriate to say it's sort of like a superhero food, or it's kind of superheroes in our food?
That's a great way to have kids get involved.
Okay.
And with the rainbow, it's really fun to have an ice cube tray and get a rainbow in the ice cube tray, cut up different colors, and if they want hummus for a dip, or ranch dressing for a dip, or even ketchup, they can go ahead and dunk their rainbow in their ice cube tray, and it's a phenomenal way to snack.
That's a great idea. Maybe also a rainbow smoothie to show them all the colors.
Absolutely.
Okay. Great.
One thing too, I love to hold up an avocado because avocados are loaded with healthy fats. Not only are they great healthy fats, but they also, if you eat avocado in a salad, it actually increases your absorption of the nutrients 5 times.
Wow. Okay, so now we're looking at this avocado. Now, if I've never had an avocado, what do I do?
So the first thing to buy an avocado is to go ahead and touch it. Make sure that you can actually put a teeny tiny bit of pressure on it.
Okay.
If you're going to eat it, say this week. If you're not, you can buy them harder and put them on the windowsill. The way that I do it is to just take a knife, cut it right down the middle, and open it up. There'll be a giant seed in there, and the kids love that. They just don't let the little ones put them in the mouth, but the older ones love them. They call them the ball. And then you can just take a spoon and scoop it out.
That's great. I've heard that you can take the pit, what's inside, and put 2 toothpicks in it and rest it on the top of a glass that's filled with water, and it will actually sprout. So kind of a fun activity at home for kids.
That is really fun for the kids.
Yeah. Can you tell me more about why vegetables are important, why I should be getting 5 a day?
Well, there's so many nutrients in vegetables that you can't get in meat or bread or other things, especially for some who are looking. We know that Healthy Futures, the initiative that we're doing, the whole focus is to make the healthy choice the easy choice.
Right.
And one of the biggest obstacles with coming into any store, grocery stores, is that people either don't have a list, they don't know what to buy, how to buy it, and they don't know what to prepare it. So one of the things that I want to make sure people know is Healthy Futures Facebook page and my website and Hannaford website all have great recipes, and so you can go in and kind of peek at seeing ways to get food. But with the question that you're asking me, we all have cells in our body that we want to, and I like to, when you're explaining it to children, you want to make the good guys go and save the world, and you want to keep the bad guys sort of hidden in a closet. You don't want them to come out. And so our genes are the same way. So a lot of people say, well, everybody in my family has cancer, everybody in my family has heart disease. So you really can sort of keep those genes off with more veggies, more veggies, more veggies. And people will say, well, is a rice chip better or a tortilla chip better? And I always say vegetable is the best chip.
Okay.
So if you can cut those up and eat them like chips in hummus or whatever else you want to dip it in, that's the best way to go.
Okay, so making them in advance, cutting them up, preparing them would be an easier choice.
Absolutely. If you can get a bunch and put them in a giant Ziploc or container at home, a closed container, so that they stay fresh, the kids will actually eat more than people think that they will, especially if you allow them the dips.
Now, I've heard, and I've taught this a little bit to kids, that you are made up of the food you eat. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely.
And how maybe choosing vegetables would be a good thing to do?
Yep. And they've actually done research studies that have shown that the higher vegetable, the lower the amount of how sick somebody gets. Not just vegetables, but other really nutritious foods. And if somebody is sick, how long it lasts and how sick do they get. It's a much shorter distance, length. Right behind us here is root vegetables. And this is sort of one of those things where people pick these up for a lot of decoration in the fall, but many times don't cook them. But they're really easy and great. You just chop them up into small pieces. You might need some mussels. Get the big guy in the house because they are kind of hard. And then just lots and lots of olive oil or butter and some garlic and some salt and throw them right in the oven. 400, it's easy, it's fast, and it's a lot of food cheap.
All right, so tell me, so if I went and I bought this, what would I do?
Well,
Would I just cut it up?
Well, first you're going to peel it.
Okay.
Because it does make it easier. And then you're just going to chop, chop, chop. And right in the center, you want to get rid of the center because it's got seeds.
Okay.
And then you just chop it up, and like I said, right in a baking dish.
Do I need a special peeler? Do I need anything?
You can use a potato peeler.
Great.
Yep.
Okay.
And the other thing that I want to tell people is anytime that you have veggies that are going bad, I'm a big fan of, number one, cook once, eat twice. So this way you've got maybe the makings of tomorrow night's dinner as well, or a soup. But also, don't throw your food away, because I get that eating healthy is very expensive all the time. But for me, if you look at a box of cereal or other things that are processed and they don't give you much, that's really expensive. But this kind of stuff can last forever. If say you have the tomatoes that are getting a little bit wrinkly, I throw those in the freezer. If I peel carrots, washing them, peeling them, I throw that in the freezer. If the lettuce or kale starts to get a little bit kind of looking like it's not going to be happy tomorrow, I throw that in the freezer. And I throw those kind of things in the smoothies that you talked about earlier.
Great. Okay, so how long can I keep them in the freezer for? Can I throw anything in there?
A couple months, yeah.
Great.
And so once a month I might take out everything that I've collected, whether it be leftover, like a little bit of leftover chicken or some leftover black beans, take them all out of the freezer, throw them in a big pot. And I always buy the broth that's in the box, so that if I don't use it all, I put that in the freezer. Take that out, and then I've not thrown away food.
That's a great tip.
Easy and cheap.
So fruits are also something we should be eating every day. Does it matter what type of fruit? Are there certain things that people should be looking for?
No, not particularly. Obviously, some people like fruits one over the other, they prefer. There are some people that struggle with, say, diabetes, and those people probably want to go with a lower glycemic. You can find that online, and that would be things that have a little bit higher sugar when it goes into our body. And for instance, the highest one would be watermelon. That's super high. But for most of the time, if you're eating fruit, the one thing that I usually try to tell people to do is to try to eat fruit with a protein. So say apple and peanut butter is a great snack, or any nut butter. If you have a peanut allergy, you could do sun butter, which is sunflower seeds. You could do almond butter, those kind of things.
I'm sure there's lots of us that are wondering, okay, glycemic. Can you go a little bit more into detail as far as what
when
that
we
means?
eat anything? I'm going to really play it down to the kids. So when you eat anything, you put food in your body. It doesn't matter if it's a candy bar or steak or apple. When you eat it, it produces sugar, even if it's not a sugary food like steak. And that sugar has a certain level, and that's where that glycemic index, that's that word. When that sugar starts to rise, you have an organ called the pancreas, and that sends out insulin. I call those soldiers.
Okay.
So you got the enemies out there, now you have to have the soldiers going out to fight them. And when you go out there, you want them to be able to find the enemy. Okay. So if the sugar is up here, the glycemic index up here, and they're hiding, because it's so high, it has trouble finding it. The protein slows that down so the insulin and the soldiers can find each other.
Okay. Great. So now you mentioned that, some of us might want to be concerned about different types of fruits for sugar content, but the average person,
no.
Right? Are we going to say there's certain fruits we shouldn't have?
No. I know there's a lot of different diets out there in the world, but I think if you're really truly focusing on eating a nutritious diet and a lot more veggies and a lot less fruit, not at all.
Okay, so we shouldn't be concerned I'm having too much vegetable or too much fruit. It doesn't matter.
Not usually, no. No.
So now what about organic?
Good question. So a lot of people will say to me, well, do you eat only organic? And I don't. I would love to say that I do, but I don't think that that's really truly important. For some people, they want to know what would make somebody choose organic over not organic. And there is a website you can go to, but for me, I think truly, I'm really more passionate about getting people to go ahead and eat the foods that they're not eating. So
Okay.
the average American eats about 150 pounds of sugar a year and only 8 pounds of broccoli a year. So let's get that sort of the other way. And if you're looking for organic versus the other, there is a website, it's called EWG. It will tell you which ones have a little bit more higher load of pesticide, which is where that organic comes in. And so if you're looking for, well, what if I just wanted to focus on, say, the 10 foods that have the highest? That would be the Dirty Dozen, and then there's the Clean 15, and you can look that up online.
Great. Okay. And now what if I'm walking through the store and I don't happen to see a sign for organic? How could I tell if the food was organic or not?
Well, there's stickers.
Okay.
On the stickers, there's certain numbers. If it starts with a 9, those are typically organic.
Oh, okay. That's a great way to know. So I know there's a lot of questions out there about grains. Should we eat them? Should we not? How much? Lots of conversations about whole grains. What do you suggest, Lisa?
That's a great question. I will say most Americans have between 4 to 10 servings of grain a day. And I know that there used to be a lot of push for that, but now we're starting to see that because we're eating usually more than our portion and having more than we should, we're finding that it's really affecting weight and affecting sugar. Again, we're back to that whole glycemic sugar thing from other posts. So I usually have my clients start looking at redirecting some of that by easily just say, I'm going to cut that in half. And I'm not saying remove it, I'm not saying you shouldn't eat it, but I think that if we really start directing more veggies, more proteins, you won't even need as many.
Okay, so one tip is you're saying instead of grains, choose fruits or vegetables.
Correct.
But now if I am choosing grains, what type of grains would you like me to choose?
I would love a whole grain, and the way that
Okay.
I would love for you to turn around the ingredient list and look for the word WHOLE. Right there, the first word in the ingredient list. Not in the front of the package, but in the ingredient list, so that you know you're actually getting a grain that's going to give you the nutrients it's suggesting it's going to give you.
So now what's the difference between whole and then I've seen the word enriched? What does that mean?
So whole grain is actually, they've taken the whole entire grain and they've processed it into this plant with the other ingredients. The enriched, they've actually pulled the starchy part of the grain and taken away the good, healthy, nutrient fiber part, and they've discarded that. And in the United States, the government doesn't want us to just have that because they don't feel that it's nutritious enough. So then they've enriched it with other vitamins in order to sell it.
So you're saying for the most part, skip the ones that have been refined or enriched and choose the whole grain
That would be
because
great.
that's where we're going to have the vitamins, minerals, and
Yes.
fiber.
Yes, get more
Okay.
for your buck. If you're gonna spend the money, you may as well spend money that you're actually helping your body to grow and helping to superpower, as you said.
Okay, so now you said whole should be my first ingredient. What if it's my second?
Well, what's
Is that
the
a bad
first?
choice?
So that's a really good, very, very good tip. So when you're looking at an ingredients list, I will say most people, when they start looking at the back of boxes, they're focusing on calories and fat.
Okay.
And one of the things that I want to start having people do, there'll be one other tip about sugar, but when you're looking at ingredients list, is to really start looking at where does the ingredient fall. The first ingredient has the highest percentage of that product. So if it's enriched wheat flour, that's the first. But if it's sugar, then sugar has the most. And it might be a percentage of 50%, and then everything else is 5% after that.
Okay, so the first ingredient is always the biggest.
Always. And,
Okay.
and the last ingredient is always the least. And so sometimes I'll pick up a product. My kids will say, oh, this looks really good. For instance, it was one time, it was a spinach thing, spinach, and I turned it over and spinach was way down the end and it was actually after food dyes. So it was green because of the food dyes, but it really didn't have any spinach.
Okay. Now I've heard a lot of people will say my children won't eat whole grains. So do you have any tips on how to increase whole grains, about how to make maybe some simple swaps to increase whole grains in the diet?
I'm a real big fan of doing if you're really trying to switch over, go ahead and do half. So if you want to switch from white rice to brown rice, then start with half.
Okay.
You know, half and half, and mix it together. They'll like it better, and then start increasing it. Same with sweet potato, white potato. You really try to do half and half so that they're increasing. And then find out what it is that they don't like. Is it the consistency? Is it the texture? And if that's the case, maybe they want it toasted. Maybe they want it a different brand entirely.
Okay. And now I think sometimes we're looking at a food and we think that it's a darker color or maybe it's darker brown. Does that mean it's a whole
No,
grain?
That's great. You have to look at the ingredients. Absolutely,
Okay.
positively.
So I shouldn't assume just because it's darker that it's a whole grain?
No, you shouldn't assume by looking at the color, and you really shouldn't and it's a bummer for me because so many people are really well intended with their kids. You purchase something that you think is really healthy because the product is labeling and marketing that, and when you turn it around, it's really not that great.
Okay. So as far as other grains, so you're saying whole grains, are there other types of grains? I know people have whole grain or whole wheat pasta, and we hear a lot about wheat. Are there other types that we should be choosing?
Yes, I would love to see people start redirecting a lot of their purchasing so that they can start experimenting, just like in the vegetables. Go in and say, okay, we've never had that before. Have the children get invested to, Mom, we've never seen this one. Let's look up a recipe. Let's help you make it. They're going to get more vested, to answer your question about eating something different. But also other ones, this is one that many people, I'm not selling this product in particular, but just the company, the name itself, quinoa. Many people don't know how to pronounce it. It's quinoa or whatever the people, but it's pronounced quinoa, and it's a phenomenal grain. It's the only one, actually, Lauren, that has protein.
Oh, wow, okay. Now, would I cook this the same way I would, say, rice, or do I do something different?
Exactly like rice.
Okay.
And I like to do it with broth, because it actually tastes yummier that way, whether it be chicken broth or vegetable broth. So the frozen broth that you didn't use last time, take it out of the freezer, and that's what I'll cook it with.
And one, I think, important thing for people to know about quinoa is that we're supposed to rinse it first. So we'll want to make sure, right, that it's rinsed. And
yes,
then...
and some of them are rinsed on there.
Okay.
It'll say no rinsing needed, and others you do have to rinse.
Oh, great. Okay. So Lisa, I've heard a lot about gluten-free products. Is gluten better for you? Should I not be having it? Can you tell me maybe the pros and cons, or why some people maybe don't eat gluten?
Absolutely. Gluten is actually the protein that comes from barley, wheat, and rye.
Okay.
And so there are people that are actually allergic, and those people, you may have heard of the term celiac or celiac sprue. And those people really can never ever have that because they can get horribly sick. It can actually lead to cancer. And so those people can't have that, and they have to go towards other grains.
Okay.
And then there's people that are feeling as if, well, when I eat it, I get a bellyache. Those people, it would be called intolerant. So they either get a bellyache, some people get migraines, some people get heartburn, some people just get real tired. And so those people, if they take it out a lot of times, they'll find themselves feeling better.
Okay, so now if I was taking out gluten from my diet, is that just grains? Are there certain things that I would look for? How would I go about if I wanted to, or if I wanted to try gluten-free foods?
Well, the first thing I tell people to do is to just start straight out with proteins, healthy proteins like meats and seeds and nuts, if you can have those, and vegetables and your fruits, because then you don't have to worry about that. Sometimes these glutens are in seasoning, so that's one thing you would have to peek for. But then as far as transitioning into how would I shop and how would I live in today's world, there are some gluten-free products in a lot of the stores nowadays, way more than they were 10 years ago. The one thing that I want people to remember is that, especially because I've had a lot of people coming to me saying that they've heard the newest thing is to lose weight would be to take gluten out. I will say that might be true for some, because for some, they have an intolerance, and intolerance actually causes weight gain. But without that, you may or may not find it. But what I think what it truly is going back to eating less grain entirely, completely, right? So if you take half of that out, like we talked about before, you're going to find yourself losing weight that way, most people. But as far as the gluten products, sometimes what I worry about is that they're still replacing one cookie for another cookie, and cookies are not bad. It's just, you really should be making the healthy choice. The easy choice would be to have one cookie and a bunch of veggies.
Okay.
Doesn't
so
matter
really
if
a
it's
lot about
gluten-free or gluten.
portions. It's not so much if I choose gluten-free because I've heard about it that suddenly I'm going to see a change or even feel a change for many people, where some might.
Right. I'd say probably 50% will and some 50% won't.
Okay, great.
Go ahead.
So Lisa, I've heard that seafood is something that we should be eating more of. How much would you suggest I eat maybe per week? And are there certain ones that I should try to choose more of, or pros and cons to different
Yes.
fish, or how that works?
So Lauren, that's a great question. So I actually am a nurse practitioner as well, and one of the things that people come to me a lot with is, can I eat fish if I'm pregnant? There's a wonderful websites about the CDC and the, we'll put the website on.
You can start over.
Okay, thank you.
Actually,
CDC.
do you want to hide your mic wire?
What is the CDC? What's the other one
What are you talking about?
that has it listed? March of Dimes.
Okay. We'll start over and I'll just
Okay.
ask
Say
you
it
a
again.
different,
Say it a different way.
smaller.
Yeah, all right.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So I've heard that eating seafood is a good, healthy choice. Are there certain recommendations as far as some people who shouldn't eat seafood or others that should eat more? How much would you recommend?
I'd recommend if you can try to get fish in at least once a week, which I would
Okay.
say most people don't. This is a great time. We're in Lent, and I know that people eat it more in Lent, but I would love to see people eat it at least once, if not twice a week.
Okay.
I like to call it, my kids call it brain power.
Mm-hmm.
So you eat the especially things like high in, like salmon is really, really huge in the omegas and DHA. And so some people have heard of these terms for.
Yeah, so what does that mean? Omega-3 DHA, what exactly is that?
Well, in our society, we eat a lot of processed food, and some of our oils make us really high in omega-6, and so our world in our body is doing this, and the omega-3s help to balance those out. And we know for a fact that those are one of the reasons that people have some heart disease, and definitely some of the things that come with brain power would be things like brain fog, confusion. I know a lot of people talk about those with ADD and autism and things like that.
Okay, so I have this right. We have two types of fat. We have omega-3 and omega-6.
There's also 9.
Okay.
But we're really high in 6 and 9s in our
Okay.
in our processed foods, and very low in 3s. And so we really want to get those 3s up.
Okay, so I want to increase my omega-3s, and to do that, I should choose what types of foods?
So fish is really great. Nuts are really great. Olive oil is super with that. Avocado we've talked about. And then there's people that talk about supplementation. And I would say if you're going to buy a supplement, make sure you turn it around and what you're buying on the label actually has that in there. Because if it says 1200 on the front, it should have some ingredients of that in the back.
Okay, so that's a great tip. Now, if we went back to seafood, which we were talking about, if we think about, I've seen two types. I've seen some that say wild and some that say farm raised. Is there a difference? What is
There
that?
is.
I don't know what that means.
Well, so wild is literally out there caught wild.
Okay.
And depending upon whether it's fresh wild or frozen, and either one I would love to see people eating more of. In fact, in most stores, if I know I'm not going to eat it till, say, Thursday and I'm shopping on a Sunday, I'll ask them for the piece of the frozen. And they'll go to the weigh in the back and buy the,
Oh,
get the
that's a great
frozen.
idea.
And then I'll just stick it, because a lot of times it is frozen defrosted in this case, so you really don't want to freeze that again. The other one is farm raised. So that means that they have fish farms that are actually raising fish.
Oh, okay. All right, so it's kind of like a fish tank.
It is a fish tank. Sometimes people will talk about whether or not it has the same nutrients and how those fish are made. Sometimes they're made quicker, so they have other genes inside of those that the wild caught won't have.
So I think it was great when you were mentioning about some of them already being frozen. So is it fine if, let's say, I wasn't gonna buy fresh, I can buy frozen? Is that an okay alternative?
Absolutely. Whether
Okay.
it be veggies, whether it be fruit, and you can throw those into your smoothie, or whether it be the fish. Sure.
Okay. Now, what about kids eating fish? Would you recommend kids?
It's great. Kids can have fish. What I would be careful of, especially with fish, children and pregnant people, is those that are high in mercury. And the highest one, of course, is swordfish.
Okay.
And it's a bummer because I love swordfish, and believe it or not, my kids love it. But we have really kind of decreased the use of that to fairly zero. And you can find that information online. And we'll post that when we air this.
So you're not saying that there's fish that I shouldn't eat, but there's some that maybe when I'm looking to my once or
Correct.
twice a week that I might want to consider differently.
Yes, so really
Great.
high on the ones that don't have
Okay.
a lot of mercury, and then maybe once or twice a year on the ones that don't have a lot of mercury.
So now when it comes to fish, I think for some of us, if we're not used to cooking fish, it can be a scarier food to one,
Yes.
purchase and then to prepare. Do you have any tips about how to overcome that for people?
So that's a really great question, because I was the worst cook. I would say I'm about awful cook now instead of the worst cook. And I've been able to manage to take the salmon. It's easy. You can just take salmon, a little bit of honey and mustard, put it on top, throw it on the grill. 15 minutes later you get fish. It's so easy and so cheap. I would say and that actually decreases the fish smell too. That's one thing that people don't love. You can put it right in the oven and do the same exact thing. You can just put butter on some haddock or cod with some garlic and salt and pepper.
Now, how do I know when it's done, right? Because I think that's the other scary part if we're not used to preparing it.
It
How do
breaks
you
apart.
know?
Breaks apart with a fork.
So I want to look for when it's breaking
Yes.
apart. That's how I'll know it's
And it should
done.
not look wet. So the salmon will look still kind of wettish.
Okay.
Very much deeper moisture look. It's the same with the cod or the haddock or the tilapia.
Okay, so when it starts to fall apart, that's when I know
When
it's
you
done.
eat up.
Great. Now, what about with fish, right? I think kids often say that they like fish, but they're eating, fish and chips or something if they're out to eat.
Yes.
Is that still beneficial? Are there, I know there's fish sticks. What exactly are the pros and cons, would you
Well,
say?
so the problem with some of those things, and it's not that they're bad, it's just that you're really good getting away from that whole food that we talked about earlier.
Okay.
So if you can keep the food as whole as possible without adding a whole bunch of things, whether it be the coating or the oils, again the 6s and 9s,
Okay.
then it would be really great to give them the fish. If you want to make your own at home, that's a completely different story, because then you have control over how it's made. You can make it with olive oil and a nice breadcrumb that you have, or just a nice flour that you have, as opposed to a whole bunch of the other things.
Okay. So when in doubt, you can, but not as your
Yes.
first choice.
No, it's really not. It's really sort of taking away from that whole food, and the nutrients go from here down to here.
Now, if I'm someone who doesn't like fish and I've tried it, the 10 to 20 times that people recommend trying something, do I look to fish oil supplements? Would you recommend that for people? Or
I think it depends person to person,
Okay.
but I do feel if they can't get it in another way, those DHAs, it would be great to see if you could do that. It's highly anti-inflammatory, and that word just means that inside your body, when you hurt your knee or you're bang your foot, you have an inflammation process where it gets red or swollen. That actually happens in our body too, and those omegas are really keeping that inflammation down, so that you're looking at less heart disease, less multiple sclerosis, cancer, those kind of things.
okay. So I need fat. Fat is not bad, but I
Fat
want to
is not
try
bad.
to focus
It
on
depends
my
on the
omega
kind of fat.
3s.
Yes.
That's really what I should
Yes.
focus on. Not so much not eating fat, because that's important,
Yes.
but eating omega 3s.
Correct. Monosaturated are wonderful fats.
So I've heard a lot about protein and about needing protein. Can you tell me a little bit, where can I find protein, if we started with that?
That's a great question. The first thing people think of is meat.
Okay.
And I think that meat is a super product for, it's easy, quick way to get a good, hearty, whole food protein. There's also beans, which is in legumes or nuts and seeds.
Oh,
and
great.
so beans you can break down, you can put them in salads, you can put them in soups, you can break them down and make a hummus out of them, like a chickpea, which is
Oh,
right
great.
behind us. So the hummus it comes in various different flavors. You can make it at home, very easy, very cheap, if we're talking about making the easy choice, the healthy choice, the easy choice, and also keeping affordability. But if for a quick grabbing one of these, you can dip anything in them, and they're delicious and on the go.
Okay. And do your kids enjoy them? As hummus?
Absolutely.
Kid
Hummus
friendly?
is kid friendly. One of the favorite things is to get hummus and just put it in a wrap, and then throw some salads or whatever inside of that and roll it up.
Okay.
You can throw some beans in there as well. It's an easy, fast, protein filled, really filling lunch.
Would you recommend for those who maybe don't eat a lot of beans to try to do, whether it's a meatless Monday or a vegetarian night, to increase bean consumption?
That's a really great comment, because a lot of people do start their day with, what am I going to have for dinner? And they reach in the freezer or in the fridge and they take out the meat, and that's sort of what they then decorate around. But it would be great to try to encourage people to step away from that focus to either meatless Mondays, there's a whole website on that, and many, many resources, or looking for other avenues to factor it in, whether it be adding things in. I'm a big fan of adding the nutrients in, and then the other stuff sort of phases out.
So let's say I was choosing meat.
Yes.
And I'm getting ready for dinner. How much of my plate, or
Oh,
how
that's
big,
Awesome question.
should the meat be?
So all of us have a nice, easy way to tell that right on our body. The size of your hand is the size of a portion of meat.
Okay.
And also beans. It's a real great way to sort of decide. This is also the size of a potato, probably a little smaller than this.
Okay.
So to keep this with you and gonna go, oh, that might be too little, too much. Pasta, the whole thing right here. But with fish, which we talked about before, you actually can get away with eating more. It's more like the size of a checkbook.
Oh,
So
great.
you can eat more than that of fish.
So with fish, I'm looking at something like a checkbook, and for meat, maybe the palm of your hand, or maybe a deck of cards for
Deck
some
of
of us
cards,
that maybe
yep.
have larger hands.
Yes.
Great.
Yep. And for sure, looking at when you have your dinner plate, a real great way to decide a portion size, which you've touched base on a couple times, is to get the smaller plates, not the big ones, but the ones that we technically usually eat our salad with.
Oh yeah.
Cut that in half,
Okay.
and one half should be all your veggies. You want to cut up a green apple and throw it into your salad. That's going to give it a little sweetness. And then one small portion would be your either your sweet potato or your brown rice or your quinoa, and then the other portion would be your meat or your beans or your vegetable type patty or whatever.
That's great. I've heard that some people recommend putting the vegetables on your plate first so that you can
Yes.
kind of crowd out some of the other foods. Would you
That's
recommend
true.
that?
That's great, great, great. Yeah, and there actually was a study done at one point, I can't quote it, that said that, and you'll laugh at this because the next time all of you go to eat, you're going to laugh, that 93% of people, when they get a plate of food, eat the starch first.
Oh, interesting.
So if the starch is not there and you have your veggies and your protein, then you don't have to worry about eating that first.
So Lisa, I've heard that water is the best drink of all. How much would you recommend someone drinking per day?
At least 8 glasses.
Okay, so 8 glasses of water a day. Now what about for some people who say they either don't like water or kids maybe struggle drinking water? What are some tips to get people to drink more water?
Well, so I think starting out young, the younger that you give water, you know, as far as the first drink, the better, because then they're used to that. But for people that you're transitioning, and that's not just kids, it's grown-ups. I have a lot of clients and patients that are both saying, no, I don't like it. So I usually have them transition with a splash of something that they do like.
Okay.
And so that they're actually adding a smidge. The other way to do it is just to cut up a lime, a lemon, an orange, and put that right in there.
So you're saying for some of it, whether it's kids or adults, we could do kind of water, infused water, whether it's with grapefruit or lime or lemon, and that maybe for others they might do more of a fruit spritzer or something where there's a splash.
Yes, and then there's a lot of people that are trying to transition away from soda if they're looking for that as a way. If you wanted to cut that down, because there is some sugar in that, then you could easily take a seltzer water and take a splash of that, and then you've got something that actually has the bubbles.
Okay, so for some of us, I know that some people do try to cut out sugar or make some changes. What are some things that you would say as far as if I was looking to reduce sugar in my diet? What would be some ways to do that?
So I think there's a lot of times that we're drinking our sugar. So whether it be the latte, whatever it is that you get on the way to work, and then midday, the sports drinks are pretty high in sugar. Definitely fruit juices are, even though they're natural and way better than maybe a soda, there's still a lot of sugar in there. And without the fiber that comes from the fruit, because you had asked about fruit or another time, that sugar raises real fast. And you need probably 6 or 7 oranges to make a small glass of orange juice. So no one's going to eat 6 or 7 oranges. Most people don't. So to be able to really kind of have some orange juice, but make it, splash it with water, or cut it with half of water.
Okay.
And then another thing that has a lot of sugar in it that people don't realize is yogurt. So yogurt's not a bad thing, but when you turn it around, and we had talked about looking at the nutrition label, and we talked about the ingredients for sure, but when you start looking at the actual label of sugar, how much does it have, you'll be surprised. Some of the yogurts or some of the protein bars, things that have sugars that you don't realize, actually have more than a candy bar.
Oh, wow.
So you really start looking at that, and one of the things that I try to tell people to do is to kind of see if you can't add it in with things that you're putting in your mouth, because it might be in some of your spaghetti sauces, those kind of things. But for adding it in, see if you can't keep those sugar grams less than 30 a day.
Okay.
That's a really great. If you can get it under 40, that'd be super, but less than 30. And then you want to start figuring out, well, what exactly is 30 grams? Okay. So do you have any idea how many teaspoons are in 30 grams of sugar?
I've heard that for every 4 grams of sugar, it's 1 teaspoon.
That's correct. So if you have a yogurt with 25 grams of sugar, yes, you're getting some great fiber and some protein, but you're also ingesting a candy bar of sugar.
Okay, so
5 teaspoons of sugar.
So it doesn't matter what I'm looking at. If I'm looking at the sugar grams in a food, every 4 grams is going to equal 1 teaspoon.
Doesn't matter what food you're looking at.
Okay, great. So I've heard that eggs are a great source of protein. I've seen a lot of different labels out there as far as if they're cage-free, natural. Can you tell me what some of that means?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So cage-free means that they were able to roam around. Free range means that they had free range of wherever they wanted to go in a large area. Cage free just means that they have a smaller area, but they were not caged in. Because some chickens are actually in small cages when they're producing the eggs for the companies. The actual natural versus not natural doesn't mean that much, believe it or not. It doesn't matter what product it's on, that word natural. It just means that it can't have plastic, actually. That's one of the bottom line. But there's no real regulation to using the word natural. Things like organic, we talked about before, does actually have true meaning. And things like, when something's labeled as natural, looking further into what does that mean. So some people are looking for products that are either no antibiotics, no steroids, and that's a real fun thing to look for when you're looking at, because sometimes it says no added and other times it says never given. And so no added just means it's not been added when they process to bring it to the store, whether it be in a meat or a chicken or a egg or cheese. But then never ever given means the animal was never given that.
Oh, okay. Great. Now with eggs, there's a lot out there about people, you know, I've heard a lot of people say that they don't eat the yolk because it's bad for us or it's too high in fat. Now what would you say about eating eggs? Would you recommend the whole egg?
So I'm laughing because I will sit with clients and it will take me an hour to get through the whole process of why the egg is so different than what we thought it was.
Yep.
The Framingham Heart Study actually has finally come out and admitted that eggs are not bad. And you can have 1 to 2 a day and you will not raise the cholesterol that's actually going to make a clog in your artery. So it might raise your total cholesterol number a little, but it will not actually cause you to get clogged arteries.
So eggs are good for me.
Eggs
So
are good.
We should
and
eat eggs.
The yolk itself you mentioned has actually lutein, L-U-T-E-I-N, and that's one of the most incredible nutrients in the world, and we really don't get enough. Eggs specifically for people that have real low cholesterol, I start to see people that have problems with going another way. Women in particular, real low cholesterol actually causes ovarian cysts. So eggs.